Woo. Wow. Thank you all. Is that working? That's working. Okay. Well, I was in the lobby greeting so many of you, which was a lot of fun. I was expecting about 20 people. Celeste didn't tell me that there'd be as many here as there are here. And so I ran into Kathy Stamps, who said, "Jim, you get to speak to all the cool kids in town." And it's true. So thank you all so much for being here today. Before I actually start with my slides, I want to thank so many. There's a number of members of my staff and the administration that are here this morning. And if you all would just stand for a minute and let everybody recognize you, because there's not a thing that I'm going to talk about that we could have gotten done without them. So, thank you all. There's a bunch of them right here. So, you recognize this at the outset. I can tell you all that this is one of those things in the last 12 years since I was vice mayor, that was nothing short of a miracle getting done. The blue horse as an identity symbol came from a group out of New York that many in the advertising and marketing industry will recognize. They're a branding shop called Pentagram. And they were hired by David Lord, who was then the executive director, president of Visit Lex, our convention and visitors bureau, to come up with an identity symbol. And they pulled this, a lot of you all may know, but they pulled it for the horse Lexington, and its image is in the Jockey Club in New York. Not blue. But what they said, and I'm going to shrink wrap what they said, what Pentagram said when they came up with this was this: you're not going to escape the horse. It's your signature. So just play with it. And so they gave it a little twist, and they came up with this, and the eye is still the same. So that's, anyway, for those of you who don't know that history, and I met Sue and Pat, am I right, over here, who just moved to Lexington. So that's a little bit of history. I'm going to go into that little bit of history because I think that what I'm going to share is how much of history and tradition actually have influenced my own thinking and the way that I've translated it as your mayor in the last 8 years. So I would characterize us as having a spirit, a tradition of aspirational thinking. One of the things that I've learned is that Lexington has a character, a tradition here. But it's not a tradition of staying still. It is a tradition of aspirational thinking. I dial back to someone that I knew, and he passed away at the ripe age of 101 about 10 years ago, maybe even 15 years ago now. Anybody recognize this image in the room? Some of you may. I know Patrick O'Dowd is here from the University Press, and he will recognize this. This is an image of Dr. Thomas Clark, who was Kentuckian's historian laureate until he passed away in the mid-90s. And what Tom Clark always said about history, and he was an amazing man. He could speak in complete sentences without dangling participles or split infinitives. He was amazing, but he always viewed history with a lens on the future, how it informs our future. He would talk often about the early period of Lexington. We were settled in 1775, 243 years ago now. So we're just a few years away from our 250th anniversary. And in the 1820s, there was an influential figure in the city. His name was, some of you know this, many of you probably do, his name was Henry Clay. And Clay viewed Lexington not as just a village or a hamlet or a town, but as a great American city. In fact, in the around 1810 or so, between 1810 and 1820. Whether this is apocryphal or not, I don't know, but Lexington was characterized by at least one historian as one of the largest cities in America, maybe in the top 10, short of Buffalo, Philadelphia, New York, and a few other cities. So Lexington, and at that period of time, in the 1820s or so, Lexington was known as the Athens of the West. And why was that? Well, in 1780, Transylvania College was established. Transylvania influenced that to a large extent, influenced the thinking and the shaping of this brand of Lexington as the Athens of the West. The first medical school in the country was established here. In fact, Thomas Jefferson said in a letter when he was working to establish the University of Virginia in Charlottesville, he said to a friend, if we don't, this was a time when regrettably only men were being sent to higher education, to universities and to colleges. So he said this, he said, I fear if we don't create our own college in Virginia, that all of our young men will go to Cambridge, parenthesis, Harvard, parenthesis closed, or to Lexington, parenthesis, Transylvania, parenthesis closed. So that was the thinking during that period. So fast forward to the 20th century. We created in Lexington more than 50 years ago now the nation's first urban services boundary, and this illustrates it. One of the handful of places in the nation to also merge the city and county government, to create governments, to create efficiencies. At the same time, we made our city government nonpartisan, and that makes an enormous influence every day. Our city council members don't go around with an R or a D on their forehead. It makes for a lot of improved decision-making. So that's the city's tradition. And frankly, it's my tradition as well. I often say, without apology, that I feel like I'm an entrepreneur. My father died when I was real young. 7 years after Dad passed away, our business was on the edge of bankruptcy. We were insolvent. So we had to do a lot of creative problem solving at that time. I always think of entrepreneurs, and Nick, wherever Nick Such is, I appreciate the shout out earlier, and I love what you guys are doing at Awesome Inc. But I think of entrepreneurs as people that do two things. One, they solve problems creatively, and two, they seize opportunities. And that's what I've tried to do in my role as mayor. Right out of the gate, we had a tough financial situation. We were in the depths of the recession. And I promise you all this is going to be the only slide with data on it, all right? Okay. When I first came into office, we were facing a real big deficit, about a $27 million deficit, with more to come. These slides actually date back a few years, but what they illustrate is that we initiated two reforms. One was for pension, the fire and police pension, and one was for health insurance. And these slides illustrate that to date we have saved almost $100 million, and over time it will be more. Our pension reform was characterized as the most effective pension reform in the country. Now that didn't happen casually. We really had to go against the grain. But I've reached back into my own fabric of history and tradition when I was there and said to myself, you know, I've been here before, we're here now, and we got to solve these problems. We've got to somehow figure out how to come together. But that was a real tough challenge. But it led to the opportunity for us to make investments because the city's financial house was in order. And one of the first ones that was announced was in 2014, and it became the 21C, the 21C Hotel and Museum. And of course, we got a double hit really with this because we got not only a hotel and we got a museum as well. And we got an occupant and a tenant for a building that had been here for 100 years. And it was literally 100 years to the year that it had been the old Fayette National Bank building was built. And another example of aspirational thinking, because in 1914, when it was built, it was designed by the nation's and arguably one of the world's leading architects, McKim, Mead, and White, out of New York City. It was one of the tallest skyscrapers in the south of Chicago. So, this demonstrated to me, in a way, that, there's the old aphorism from Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. Well, I view it this way: build it first for your own people, then others will come. And so that was the theme for that project at that time. And this next slide, when I said earlier, nothing short of a miracle, here's another example of it. This building, I hope that some of you have already, by the way, been to Zim's or the Thirsty Fox. Great establishments already, and they're on the first floor. But when I say nothing short of a miracle, there were literally people in town, and I ran into a woman at the Thirsty Fox just the other night who said, Jim, I looked at that building, and it was so dirty, and it was so ugly on the inside. I thought you should just tear it down. And I took a deep breath, and I said, well, don't you think it's good we didn't? I think it's just great we didn't tear it down. Believe it or not, we had council members that wanted to tear it down. But through a creative solution, and recognizing tradition, we saved it. The creative solution was a public-private partnership with the leadership of someone who knew how to do that. And that's what I insisted on. We got to get somebody who knows how to do these public-private partnerships for historic properties. And our very own Holly Wiedemann, one of the nation's leading preservationists who does this sort of work, won the competition to be the project manager for the project. And Holly did an outstanding job. I describe it as she curated this project. And Jennifer Waremma, we just say at the shop, Jennifer W. Anyway, Jennifer, you did just an outstanding job with this project as a project manager for the city too. So give her a hand, will you? Y'all take a minute. So this was a $33 million project. I knew, and the first estimate was $38 million, and I said, there's no way. We got to cut that back. From my own experience in construction, I looked at the estimate real quickly and said, that's too high. That's coming from a Philadelphia estimator. It's got to be better than that. So we cut it back to $33 million, but also sensed that that was going to be more of a lift. This is where the 3P came into place, the public-private partnership. We were able to commit $22 million by the city, and we were able to sell tax credits for $10 million. So that gave us up for just over $10 million. That gave us around a budget of around $33 million. And what's really outstanding about this project too is the city doesn't have ongoing costs or expenses. We are able, because we have tenants, we have the Breeders' Cup in here, we have Visit Lex in here, and we have a wonderful entertainment space on the top floor where the rotunda is of course located, and then we've got Zim's and the Thirsty Fox on the first floor. So these tenants actually pay for the ongoing maintenance of the building. I'll tack back for a second. 21C was really the catalyst for this development in the urban space, especially in the downtown. And then that success there led to, sort of in a domino effect, to success with the old courthouse, the funding of the old courthouse. There was a turbulent period on this project, the renovations, a turbulent period where we were working with the university, and not unexpectedly, the university and the president had ambitions and aspirations and goals and objectives that did not coincide precisely with the city's and the timing. But again, nothing short of a miracle perhaps, but eventually my own sense was this project had to happen. was a 50-year-old building, and it was designed at a time when arenas were not visibly necessarily, they didn't have to be necessarily or need to be attractive visually. They weren't viewed in 50 years ago as such a highlight, a branding symbol for a city. But today they are. And my own sense, literally in 2010, in my first State of the City address, I said, we're in the tough times, we're in a recession, but we got to figure this out, and we got to renovate Rupp Arena. So this is, fortunately, we've had the groundbreaking now, and the project is underway. Here's another look at the overall project. You can see the convention center, and all of this together puts Lexington, in my view, on another level. I know that we're running into time constraints. I want to take questions. I want to also show that this project, this one, the town branch, I love hearing that. A ribbon, I describe the town branch, the linear park, as a ribbon of the bluegrass running through the downtown. It's connecting 22 miles of parks, of trails rather, the Town Branch Trail and the Legacy Trail. And we all know that great cities have great parks. Here's another illustration of the Town Branch where we will have multimodal transportation options. Yes, dedicated bicycle lanes, believe it or not. See, I said this is all the cool kids in town. I could not say this all over the city and get applause. You know, but with 20 days left in my term, I can say practically anything. Yeah. All right. And then finally, let's not forget that Lexington will soon be the nation's largest gigabit city. We're about a quarter of the way through on this project today, already turned on the first customers, and we will have gigabit speeds throughout Lexington, as I said earlier, creating a magnet for creators, like so many of you in this room, folks who need to share with the world pictures and designs and videos and ideas. So in summing it up, in shrink wrapping again, it's important to respect tradition and to challenge it as well. It's important to respect it and to challenge it. I said I'm going to sum it up, but I'm going to say this, I'm going to illustrate the part about challenging tradition this way. When Charlottesville erupted a little over a year ago in August of 2017 on a Saturday, I was watching that. We convened at the mayor's office, and I decided then that we were going to move up an announcement that I had planned for the following Tuesday. Announcement to remove and relocate the Confederate statues that were on the courthouse lawn. Immediately, the white nationalists descended onto Lexington from Charlottesville. Lexington was the next target. So that was a challenging and turbulent time. There were lots of opinions, different points of view. There were those who viewed these statues at their then present location as essential to tradition. And there were those who recognized that the tradition of our African American brothers and sisters saw it through a lens quite differently. My decision at the end of the day was that based on challenging tradition, respecting it to the point that we were actually able to be the only city in the country that has removed and relocated these statues to a place where it is more appropriate, where you have to go, not in the public space, but in a cemetery, a museum-like location, where if you want to see them, you can go to see them. But if you are like our African-American brothers and sisters, like DeBron Thomas in Take Back Cheapside said to me, I don't want to have to go by these statues every day. I shouldn't have to go by these every day. So, as I turn over the keys to the city, I want to say thanks to all of you in this room, our city's creative class, who uphold our city's tradition of aspiring to greater heights It's been my honor to work with all of you to make our city a better place.